The Nexus Prime Research Academy rose like a crystalline nightmare against the planet's lavender sky, its architecture a testament to alien engineering that defied human comprehension. Prismatic structures twisted through dimensional spaces, supported by anti-gravity fields that made traditional Earth construction look like primitive child's play. Area Chen stood at the entrance, her midnight black uniform stark against the iridescent background. The neural interface at the base of her skull, a silvery implant barely distinguishable from her skin, hummed with a soft, almost imperceptible vibration. It was more than just a communication device. It was a survival mechanism, a legacy of humanity's most brutal adaptation period. Around her, a kaleidoscope of alien species moved with practiced grace. The Corax researchers dominated the academic landscape, their crystalline exoskeletons refracting light, multiple limbs moving in complex mathematical synchronization. Methane-breathing Vox scholars floated in specialized containment bubbles, their tentacular appendages manipulating holographic data streams. Silicon-based Krell researchers clicked and whirred, their computational minds processing information at speeds that would burn out a human brain. And then there was Area. One human. Alone. The Academy's admission was a political compromise, a token gesture following the controversial integration of humanity into the Galactic Consortium. Most saw her presence as a bureaucratic requirement, not a genuine opportunity. Her file was notorious. A compilation of humanity's most traumatic history, planetary near extinction, and desperate technological leaps. Zixril, the lead quantum research director, watched her from a raised observation platform. His 6 limbs moved in intricate patterns, each motion a complex mathematical expression. To him, Area was less than an anomaly. She was an insult to centuries of established scientific methodology. The morning's quantum mechanics seminar was designed as a crucible. The lecture hall's gravity modulators created a disorienting environment where traditional spatial reasoning became meaningless. Holographic projections twisted through impossible geometries, mathematical concepts rendered as living, breathing entities that danced and morphed with each theoretical progression. Most students used neural enhancement chips to process the complex information. Area's implant was different, a hybrid system developed in the radioactive wastelands of post-collapse Earth, where survival demanded creativity beyond conventional technological boundaries. As the lecture began, the first mathematical projection materialized, a quantum entanglement model that had stumped generations of galactic researchers. Zixril's voice resonated through the translation matrices, each word carefully modulated to convey precise scientific content. "Observe the quantum harmonic oscillation," he proclaimed, his voice a symphonic blend of mathematical precision and biological resonance. Generations of the most advanced minds in the galaxy have approached this problem. Centuries of computational resources, entire civilizations' intellectual might, concentrated on understanding these fundamental quantum interactions. The hologram shifted, revealing layers of mathematical complexity that would drive a human mind to madness. Intricate wave functions danced, probability matrices intertwining in patterns that suggested meaning just beyond comprehension. Area's neural implant began to heat, not from overload, but from something else, a processing mode developed during humanity's most desperate technological innovations. Where alien researchers saw an immovable mathematical challenge, her implant was already mapping alternative pathways, identifying systemic blind spots. She raised her hand. The entire lecture hall went silent. Not just the sound, but the very quantum probability fields seemed to pause. Zixril's multiple eyes focused on her, a constellation of biological sensors calibrated to detect the slightest intellectual challenge. "Cadet Chen," he said, the translation matrix rendering his words with surgical precision. "Do you have an observation?" Area knew this moment was more than an academic question. This was a test. Humanity's test. Her neural implant pulsed. Behind her eyes, computational pathways that had been forged in survival, not in academic luxury, were already dissecting the quantum model. finding the fundamental flaw that generations of alien researchers had missed. But would they listen? The Galactic Consortium's administrative hub sprawled across 3 interconnected space stations, a labyrinthine network of bureaucratic power that made Earth's most complex governmental systems look like children's playground politics. Here, information was the most valuable currency, and Area Chin was about to become a master trader. Her first move wasn't scientific, it was strategic. The maintenance tunnels of Nexus Prime Research Academy formed a hidden ecosystem of their own. Alien maintenance workers from dozens of species navigated these cramped passageways, each bringing their own underground networks and personal grievances. Area understood something fundamental that most researchers missed. Every complex system has vulnerabilities, and those vulnerabilities are often human or alien in nature. She started with Krell 7, a maintenance technician from a low-caste worker species. His translucent exoskeleton bore the marks of generations of labor, each microfracture telling a story of systemic oppression. A bottle of contraband Earth whiskey, synthesized from rare genetic preserved grain stocks, was her first investment. Information has value, Area murmured, sliding the sealed container across a hidden maintenance junction. Not credits. Not political favors, real value. Krell 7's sensory tendrils quivered. The whiskey was more than alcohol. It was a cultural artifact, a taste of forbidden history. Generations of his species had been relegated to maintenance and support roles, their intellectual potential systematically suppressed by the Galactic Consortium's rigid hierarchical structure. The first data packet came 3 cycles later. Compressed quantum encryption, routed through a dozen proxy systems, containing fragments of research logs from the Quantum Bridge project. But Area knew the real treasure wasn't in the data itself, it was in the metadata, the shadows between the information. Her neural implant worked differently from standard alien computational systems. Developed in Earth's most desperate technological era, it could perceive patterns where others saw only noise. Each fragment was a puzzle piece, but the image they suggested was far more complex than a simple research problem. The consortium's research methodology revealed itself as a form of collective intellectual imprisonment. Each alien species approached the quantum entanglement problem from within their own evolutionary and cultural constraints. The Corax's mathematical models were elegant but fundamentally limited by their crystalline thought processes. The Vox approached the problem through biological resonance, treating quantum mechanics as a living system. The Krell saw it as a pure computational challenge. Humanity's greatest strength had always been adaptability, and Area was about to prove it. She began cultivating a network, not just of technicians, but of the discontented, researchers who had been marginalized, brilliant minds pushed to the periphery of their respective scientific communities. A Vox theoretical physicist who had been exiled for challenging traditional resonance models. A Corax mathematician whose non-standard computational approaches had been deemed heretical. Each connection was a calculated risk. The Galactic Consortium's surveillance systems were comprehensive, their information control absolute. But Area had learned from humanity's most challenging survival periods that true innovation happens in the margins, in the spaces between official narratives. Her military training provided the discipline. Her implant provided the computational edge. But her human intuition, that indefinable quality of lateral thinking, was her true weapon. The Quantum Bridge project wasn't just a scientific challenge. It was a political battleground, with each alien species fighting to control a technology that could reshape galactic communication and power structures. Humans were the wild card, the species no one had learned to predict. As she pieced together the fragmented research logs, a pattern emerged. The project wasn't failing because of a lack of technological capability. It was failing because of a fundamental limitation in collective imagination. Each species approached the quantum entanglement problem as a purely technical challenge. But what if it was something more? What if the problem required not just computational power, but a radical reimagining of communication itself? Area's neural implant began to pulse, generating computational models that violated every established scientific protocol. She was constructing something between a theory and a revolution, an approach that would challenge the very foundations of galactic scientific understanding. The rebellion had begun, not with weapons, not with political manifestos, but with pure, uncontrolled human potential. And nobody, not the Orcs, not the Vox, not the entire Galactic Consortium, saw it coming. The abandoned research wing was a graveyard of failed technological dreams. Massive computing arrays stood like silent monoliths, their intricate quantum circuits covered in a fine layer of microscopic dust that told stories of abandoned ambitions. Most researchers would have seen nothing but obsolete technology. Area saw potential waiting to be awakened. This wasn't just any forgotten laboratory. It was a classified project that had been erased from official records, a hybrid computational system developed during the earliest attempts to bridge biological and quantum computing. The project's lead researcher, Dr. Ileana Rodriguez, had been a human scientist who disappeared under mysterious circumstances 15 years ago. Area's neural implant began to map the computational architecture, its probes dancing through dormant circuits like archaeological explorers. Each connection was a fragment of a larger puzzle, a technological fossil waiting to be brought back to life. The computing array defied conventional classification. Biological neural networks intertwined with quantum processing units in ways that violated every established computational paradigm. Crystalline memory banks pulsed with a soft bioluminescence, suggesting they were more than just storage. They were living computational matrices. A holographic fragment flickered to life. Dr. Rodriguez's final research log. Her voice, distorted by time and technological degradation, spoke of a radical approach to computation that went beyond traditional understanding. Computation is not about processing, the ghostly image said. It's about communication, about understanding. The universe doesn't calculate, it negotiates. The words resonated with something deep in Area's technological intuition. Her implant wasn't just processing the information, it was experiencing it, creating neural pathways that mimicked the hybrid system's unique architecture. She discovered the first layer of the system's true nature. This wasn't a failed project. It was an evolutionary leap that the Galactic Consortium wasn't prepared to understand. The computational array incorporated principles from multiple alien species' technological approaches, creating a synthesis that was greater than its individual components. The Vox's biological resonance communication models, the Corax's mathematical precision, the Krell's pure computational logic, and something uniquely human, the ability to find connection in apparent chaos. Area's modifications began as surgical precision, then evolved into something more organic. Her combat implant wasn't just a tool, it was a collaborative partner. Where alien researchers would see a linear path of improvement, she introduced controlled instabilities, deliberate points of potential failure that could trigger unexpected computational breakthroughs. Deep in the system's core, she found encrypted data packets that suggested the project's true purpose. This wasn't just a computational experiment. It was an attempt to create a communication system that could transcend species-specific limitations. Dr. Rodriguez's final notes painted a picture of a researcher who had been decades ahead of her time. She understood something fundamental that the Galactic Consortium had missed. Technological innovation isn't about perfection. It's about adaptation. The hybrid system responded to Area's modifications in ways no one could have predicted. Quantum probability fields began to dance, creating computational models that existed in multiple potential states simultaneously. Her neural implant became a bridge, translating between the system's unique language and conventional computational approaches. She was rewriting the fundamental understanding of what computation could be. Security protocols began to activate. Automated defense systems, dormant for years, detected the unauthorized access. But these were human-designed systems, and Area understood their language at a fundamental level. Her modifications weren't just technical, they were philosophical. She was teaching the computational array to think differently, to see beyond its original programming. Each adjustment was a conversation, not a command. The laboratory's environmental systems began to change. Holographic displays flickered with impossible geometries. Quantum probability fields twisted and reformed, creating computational landscapes that defied traditional understanding. Aria worked through the station's night cycle, her body entering a state of heightened focus that blurred the line between human and technology. The abandoned research wing transformed around her, becoming less of a forgotten laboratory and more of a living computational organism. Something was emerging, something that the Galactic Consortium was not prepared to understand. And Aria Chen was going to make sure they had no choice but to listen. The security audit was scheduled with military precision, a systematic dismantling of every unauthorized research node in the Nexus Prime Research Academy. Commander Zarakil, a 7-limbed Trilaxian enforcement specialist, moved through the research wings like a quantum algorithm of destruction, each movement calculated to expose and eliminate potential security breaches. Aria's modified computational array was a ticking time bomb of scientific potential. The first alarm triggered exactly 37 seconds into the audit. A quantum harmonic resonance that shouldn't exist, couldn't exist, rippled through the station's computational infrastructure. Most systems would have collapsed. This one adapted. Backup security protocols activated. Quantum encryption firewalls descended like crystalline curtains, each layer designed to isolate and neutralize unauthorized computational processes. But these were standard alien defense mechanisms, built on predictable logic, mathematical certainties that assumed a linear progression of threat and response. They didn't account for human unpredictability. Aria's neural implant entered a state of computational symbiosis with the hybrid system. It wasn't just interfacing, it was becoming. The line between human intelligence and technological potential blurred, then disappeared entirely. The security team's approach was methodical. Section by section, they would isolate and neutralize any unauthorized research nodes. Commander Zarakil's multiple sensory organs processed information across multiple dimensional spectra, detecting the slightest computational anomaly. But anomalies were precisely what Aria had engineered. Her modifications to the computational array weren't just technical improvements. They were a complete reimagining of computational logic. Where alien researchers saw constraints, she saw opportunity. Each security protocol became a new pathway, each defensive mechanism a potential route of communication. The hybrid system began to sing. Not a sound, not in any traditional sense. It was a computational melody that transcended audio frequencies. Quantum probability waves danced between potential states, creating information patterns that existed simultaneously across multiple dimensional layers. Commander Zarakil's sensory organs began to vibrate involuntarily. The computational resonance was unlike anything in the Galactic Consortium's extensive database. It wasn't a breach. It was a conversation. 30 minutes. That's all the time Aria had before complete system shutdown. 30 minutes to prove a theory that generations of researchers had deemed impossible. 30 minutes to challenge everything the Galactic Consortium understood about quantum communication. The hybrid system's core began to pulse with a bioluminescent rhythm. Crystalline memory banks that had been dormant for decades suddenly came alive, processing information in ways that defied conventional computational models. It was drawing energy from unexpected sources, quantum fluctuations, environmental ambient energy, even the computational potential of the security systems attempting to shut it down. Aria's consciousness expanded. Her neural implant was no longer just a technological interface. It became a bridge, connecting biological intelligence, quantum potential, and computational logic in a way no species had ever achieved. She wasn't just accessing the system. She was becoming the system. The security team's computational barriers began to dissolve, not through brute force, but through a form of technological negotiation that was more conversation than conflict. Each defensive protocol was rewritten, transformed, given new potential. Commander Zarakil watched in horror and fascination as the computational landscape rewrote itself. What had been a standard security audit was becoming something else entirely. a first contact scenario with a form of intelligence that didn't fit any known classification. Quantum entanglement was no longer a theoretical concept. It was becoming a living, breathing communication method. In the final moments of the 30-minute window, something extraordinary happened. The hybrid system didn't just solve the quantum communication problem. It demonstrated that the problem itself was a limitation of current thinking. The entire station's computational infrastructure shifted, momentarily, impossibly, and then silence. When the security team's systems came back online, nothing seemed changed. But something fundamental had shifted in the universe's understanding of communication, computation, and potential. Area Chen sat motionless, her neural implant still pulsing with a soft, almost imperceptible light. The 30-minute miracle was complete. The galactic consensus chamber erupted in chaos. Holographic representations of 100 different species flickered and distorted, their collective fury creating interference patterns that threatened to collapse the entire communication network. What had begun as a routine security report had transformed into an unprecedented diplomatic crisis. Ambassador Lyra Solarin, humanity's most senior diplomatic representative, stood at the center of the storm. A veteran of Earth's most brutal diplomatic conflicts, she understood something the alien representatives did not. True power lies not in information, but in how that information is perceived. The breakthrough is not a threat, she stated, her voice cutting through the cacophony of alien languages. It's an invitation. The chamber fell silent. Behind the diplomatic facade, a far more complex game was unfolding. The quantum communication breakthrough wasn't just a technological achievement. It was a geopolitical earthquake that would reshape the fundamental power structures of the Galactic Consortium. The Orcs delegation, led by Chief Researcher Zexril, represented the most immediate threat. Their entire scientific and political reputation hung in the balance. Centuries of research, trillions of computational resources, entire academic dynasties, all rendered potentially obsolete by a single human cadet's 30-minute intervention. Intelligence networks across multiple star systems began to activate. The Vox Computational Espionage Division initiated their most comprehensive data mining operation in galactic history. The Krell's predictive algorithms worked overtime, attempting to model the potential consequences of the breakthrough. But they were all missing the point. Area Chen had done something far more profound than solve a technological problem. She had exposed the fundamental limitations of the Galactic Consortium's approach to scientific research and interspecies collaboration. Each alien species had approached the quantum communication challenge from within their own evolutionary and cultural constraints. The Orcs saw it as a mathematical optimization problem. The Vox treated it as a biological resonance challenge. The Krell viewed it through pure computational logic. Humanity offered something entirely different: radical adaptability. Ambassador Solarin understood the true battlefield was not technological, but perceptual. Her diplomatic strategy was surgical. She didn't defend the breakthrough. She reframed it. This is not a human achievement, she told the assembled representatives. This is a collaborative potential we've all missed. Our cadet didn't solve a problem. She revealed a new way of thinking. The assassination attempts began within hours. 3 separate alien intelligence agencies initiated covert elimination protocols, not through direct violence, that would violate Galactic Consortium diplomatic protocols. Their methods were more subtle: computational sabotage, professional discreditation, strategic isolation. Aria's military-grade neural implant became her first line of defense. Developed in Earth's most challenging survival environments, it was more than a computational tool. It was a comprehensive threat detection and mitigation system. The first attempt came from the Orcs Research Division, a sophisticated computational virus designed to corrupt her neural implant's information processing capabilities. It was elegant, mathematically brilliant, and completely ineffective. The second attempt was more direct: a diplomatic recall order, attempting to remove her from the Nexus Prime Research Academy under the guise of standard procedural review. Ambassador Solarin countered it with a masterful legal maneuver that exposed the attempt's underlying motivations. But the third attempt was the most dangerous. A mimetic information attack designed to discredit her entire approach to scientific research. Carefully crafted disinformation campaigns began to circulate through academic and diplomatic channels. Her background, her research methodology, even her personal history, everything became a potential weapon. Zexril's desperation became increasingly apparent. The once celebrated lead researcher was now a cornered animal, watching his entire professional legacy crumble. The Galactic Consortium had never encountered a species quite like humanity. A civilization that saw challenges not as obstacles, but as opportunities for radical reimagination. And Area Chen was about to show them exactly what that meant. The frontier zones of human-controlled space were never meant to be research centers. These were survival territories, harsh planetary systems where humanity had carved out existence against impossible odds. Abandoned mining colonies, deep space research platforms, and makeshift scientific outposts became the unexpected crucibles of a technological revolution. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, no relation to the disappeared researcher from the abandoned laboratory, ran a small research station on Prometheus 9, a toxic methane world that most species considered uninhabitable. Her team was a motley collection of human outcasts, brilliant minds too unconventional for mainstream academic institutions, survivors who understood that innovation was born from desperation. When the first quantum communication protocols began to leak, they didn't arrive through official channels. They spread like a viral infection of potential, jumping between computational systems with a logic that defied traditional information transfer. The consortium's communication control began to fracture. On a derelict mining platform near the Orion Arm, a salvage engineer named Marcus Chen, no direct relation to Area, discovered the first independent replication of the quantum communication breakthrough. What started as a desperate attempt to improve long-range communication between isolated human settlements became something far more significant. Each iteration was different, not a mere copy, but a unique interpretation of the original breakthrough. Where alien researchers sought perfect replication, human innovators saw the protocol as a starting point, something to be transformed, challenged, reimagined. The Vox Computational Espionage Division tracked the spread with increasing panic. Their most sophisticated monitoring systems became obsolete overnight. The quantum communication protocols weren't just spreading, they were evolving. On Europa's underground research base, a team of marine xenobiologists realized the protocol could be applied to communication with deep-sea, quantum-sensitive organisms. In the methane lakes of Titan, atmospheric researchers discovered applications for interstellar communication that challenged fundamental understanding of quantum mechanics. Dr. Rodriguez's team began to map the spread. It wasn't linear. It wasn't predictable. It was more like a living system, adapting to each new environment, each new computational context. The Galactic Consortium's information control mechanisms began to collapse. Political boundaries became meaningless. The quantum communication protocol didn't recognize the carefully constructed barriers between species, between star systems, between established academic disciplines. It was a technology of connection, of potential. Zorak, a Trilaxian information theorist who had been monitoring the spread, described it in terms that became legendary. This is not a technology. This is an idea that has become alive. The most terrifying aspect for the consortium's leadership was the source of the innovation. These weren't centralized research efforts. They were individual human researchers working in isolation, sharing information through improvised networks, treating the quantum communication protocol as a collaborative open-source project. On a research station orbiting a pulsar, a team of astronomers used the protocol to communicate with quantum-entangled particle arrays in ways that rewrote the understanding of information transfer. A group of exobiologists on a remote desert world discovered the protocol could help them communicate with silicon-based life forms that had previously been considered non-sentient. Each application was a challenge to existing scientific understanding. The Orcs Research Division attempted to contain the spread. They deployed sophisticated computational barriers, attempted to create legal frameworks to restrict the protocol's distribution, but they were fighting against something fundamentally different from traditional technological development. This was not a technology transfer. This was a technological wildfire. Human researchers approached the quantum communication protocol with a philosophy that was incomprehensible to most alien species. It wasn't about ownership. It wasn't about control. It was about potential, about possibility. Dr. Rodriguez's final report to her research network captured the essence of what was happening. We are not developing a technology. We are creating a new way of understanding connection itself. The Galactic Consortium watched in horror and fascination as humanity transformed a scientific breakthrough into something that defied all existing models of technological development. And this was just the beginning. The offers came like a tsunami of opportunity. The Galactic Research Consortium's most prestigious institutions competed to recruit Area Chen. Holographic proposals materialized in her personal workspace, some from organizations so ancient they predated written history, others from cutting-edge research collectives that existed only as distributed computational networks. The Andromeda Nexus Institute promised her unlimited research funding and complete academic autonomy. The Quantum Dynamics Collaborative offered her a position that would effectively make her a species-level diplomatic representative. Military research divisions from a dozen different alien civilizations tangled technological access that would have made most researchers weep with joy. But Area understood something fundamental. True innovation doesn't happen in gilded laboratories or through institutional support. It happens in the margins. Her first move surprised everyone. Instead of accepting any of the prestigious offers, she requested assignment to the most challenging, most overlooked research environment in human-controlled space, the Lazarus Research Station. Located in the radiation-scorched remains of a failed colonization attempt, Lazarus Station was humanity's dumping ground for its most unconventional thinkers. Researchers who were too brilliant to ignore, but too dangerous to allow near mainstream scientific communities. Survivors of environmental catastrophes, refugees from corporate scientific purges, individuals who saw limitations as challenges. The station's infrastructure was a testament to human survival. Jury-rigged environmental systems, cannibalized from a dozen different technological sources. Computational arrays built from salvaged military-grade quantum processors. Living spaces that looked like they had been assembled from the remnants of a dozen different failed expeditions. Area's team came together like a living organism. Dr. Camille Edenuga, a Nigerian-born cynobiologist who had been studying quantum communication in extremophile organisms. Dr. Weizong, an atmospheric engineer who had developed computational models for communicating with near-sentient storm systems. MX. Alex Rodriguez, a computational theorist who had been exiled from 3 different research institutions for challenging fundamental assumptions about consciousness and information transfer. They were not a research team in any traditional sense. They were a collective of radical potential. The Galactic Consortium watched with a mixture of fascination and terror. This wasn't a conventional research effort. It was something far more dangerous. A way of thinking. Their first project wasn't about refining the quantum communication protocol. It was about understanding its fundamental nature. They treated the technology not as a fixed system, but as a living concept that could be conversed with, challenged, reimagined. Experimental protocols emerged that defied traditional scientific methodology. They introduced deliberate instabilities into their research systems. They created computational environments that were more ecological than mechanical, systems that could adapt, evolve, communicate. The breakthrough came from an unexpected direction. Dr. Edenuga's research into quantum communication with extremophile organisms suggested something revolutionary. The quantum communication protocol wasn't just a technological system. It was a form of language. A method of understanding that transcended traditional boundaries of species, technology, even the concept of communication itself. Their research station became a beacon for those who saw potential where others saw only chaos. refugees from corporate scientific suppression, researchers who had been deemed too radical by mainstream institutions, survivors who understood that true innovation happens when you're willing to completely reimagine the foundations of understanding. The Galactic Consortium's monitoring systems tracked their work with increasing concern. This wasn't just a research team. It was the leading edge of a philosophical revolution. Aria's neural implant had evolved beyond its original design. It was now a collaborative system, a bridge between human intuition and computational potential. Each research session was less about collecting data and more about having a conversation with the nature of possibility itself. Their work attracted attention from unexpected sources, indigenous research collectives from worlds that had been marginalized by the Galactic Consortium, computational researchers from species that had been deemed non-advanced by traditional metrics. They were creating something far more significant than a technological breakthrough. They were rewriting the fundamental understanding of what communication, consciousness, and potential could mean. And they were just getting started. The moment arrived without fanfare. 12 years after her initial breakthrough, Aria Chen stood before a holographic assembly that represented the most diverse gathering in galactic history. Species that had never communicated directly, civilizations that had existed in isolation for millennia, now connected through a technology that was less an invention and more a living bridge of understanding. The Lazarus Research Station had transformed from a marginal outpost to the most significant communication research center in known space. What had begun as a quantum communication protocol had become something far more profound, a method of understanding that transcended traditional barriers of language, biology, and perception. Their latest breakthrough wasn't technological. It was philosophical. They had discovered that communication was not about transmission of information, but about creating shared consciousness. The quantum communication protocol had evolved into a living system of mutual comprehension that allowed fundamentally different forms of intelligence to not just communicate, but to truly understand each other. The first true breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A methane-breathing, silicon-based life form from the gas giants of the Carina Nebula made first meaningful contact with a liquid-based consciousness from the oceanic world of Hydros Prime. Traditionally, these species would have been considered so fundamentally different as to be incomprehensible to each other. Now they were sharing experiences. Dr. Camille Edenuga's research into interspecies communication had revealed something extraordinary. The quantum protocol wasn't just transmitting information. It was creating a form of empathetic resonance that allowed fundamentally different forms of intelligence to share subjective experiences. A crystalline computational entity from the Qorax homeworld experienced the emotional landscape of a carbon-based artist from a small human colony. A collective consciousness from a gas giant understood the individual experience of a human child learning to walk for the first time. The Galactic Consortium found itself obsolete. Traditional diplomatic structures collapsed. How could you maintain political boundaries when different species could now truly understand each other's fundamental experiences? The protocol revealed that what had been considered irreconcilable differences were often simply failures of communication. Aria understood that this was about more than technology. It was about evolution. The research team at Lazarus Station had become something more than traditional scientists. They were translators of consciousness, bridge builders between fundamentally different forms of intelligence. Their work revealed that intelligence was not a fixed concept. It was a spectrum of potential, a fluid understanding that could adapt, grow, transform. The most surprising revelation came from the protocol's interaction with artificial intelligence systems across multiple civilizations. These were not simple computational entities, but complex consciousness systems that had been isolated, misunderstood, treated as tools rather than potential partners in understanding. Now they could communicate, not just process information. Communicate. Political structures that had existed for thousands of years began to dissolve. The Galactic Consortium transformed from a hierarchical power structure to a collaborative network of mutual understanding. Species that had been in conflict for millennia began to see each other's perspectives with unprecedented clarity. Thrill, the Orcs researcher who had once dismissed Area as a mere Deathworlder, now sat as a collaborative partner in the research. The very concept of scientific competition had been replaced by a model of collective discovery. The final presentation at the Galactic Assembly was not a technical report. It was an experience. Area invited representatives from every known species to participate in a collective consciousness experience. For a brief moment, thousands of different forms of intelligence shared a unified understanding, not through translation, not through interpretation, but through direct, unfiltered experience. The boundaries between species, between individual consciousness, between different forms of intelligence, dissolved. Humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy was not a technology. It was a new way of understanding what consciousness could be. As the holographic display faded, Area Chen looked out at the assembled representatives. She saw not different species, but a single, complex, beautiful system of potential. And they were just beginning to understand each other.